I acknowledge the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land upon which I am gathered here in Toronto, or Takaranto in Ontario, Canada. Thank you very much for the introduction, Helen. Just a little bit about OCAD University. So OCAD University is the oldest and largest art and design institution in Canada. Again, as I was so wonderfully introduced, I'm the first Black and Black female dean of the Faculty of Design Anywhere. I'm a design anthropologist, which I'll explain a little bit of what that is, and I'm also African American, which just means that I have a great love for the notion of respect, and particularly the way in which we talk about respectful design. And so what I'm going to present to you is a project called It's My Future Toronto, where we were working with youth to design for and by BIPOC people, and I'll explain what BIPOC is as a way to sort of differentiate different peoples who reside here in Canada. As an anthropologist, I'm really interested in values, and so a lot of the value that I'm going to talk about is respect. The ethos of OCAD University is respectful design. And it really is about how we internally cultivate ourselves as designers and the kind of impact that we want to have in the world, while taking into account that the world has its own ways in which it wants to function. Again, as an anthropologist, I'm very interested in values, but as they relate to the way in which design makes them ways that are tangible and so that people can directly experience them. And so I'm interested in how not only do we redesign based on those experiences, but how we rethink and articulate different values in relationship to the experiences that people want to have. Respectful design is really important because design in many ways has been quite disrespectful to BIPOC communities and the land. And by BIPOC, it's a term that we use in Canada, but it's gaining more ground in North America to differentiate between the communities who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And I'll break down those differentiations for you next. This becomes important because in many ways, my BIPOC students here at OCAD University, and I have about 3,600 of them, often feel like they have to choose between their identities and being a professional designer. And this is because the values of design have been and still are in many ways colonial, white supremacist, patriarchal, and capitalist, and that those values have been quite harmful to many of my BIPOC students and the communities they hail from. So just to kind of break this down a little bit for you before I turn into kind of why this is important to understand and engage young people in design is, so in Canada, we're called what's a settler colonial state. So the land in which we are was first inhabited by Indigenous peoples. Settlers came from many places, including England, to settle on the land and build a good life. And in that process, they also imported slaves to do some of the labor that they did not want to do. So one of the things in which we try to understand the role of different communities in relationship to the colonial settler state is what's their relationship to the land and what's their relationship to the assimilist policies that the government has set in place in a colonial state. So the land is stolen and pillaged from Indigenous peoples, and the relationship to this state is that if you are Black, Indigenous, or POC, that many of the policies are meant to be culturally, if not physically, genocidal. This is just important to kind of break down the role of design sometimes in these processes. So for Black communities here in North America, they've been brought to the land involuntarily, and that the policies in terms of like assimilation makes them unassimilatable. Meaning like my name is Elizabeth Tunstall, quite an English name. English is my first language, but I am of African heritage, right? And regardless of all the assimilation that my generations and my communities have done to speak the English language, to to not be able to practice our own dances, so then being able to create dances based on European cultures, all of these sort of processes, is that the way in which the North America is set up is that we are unassimilatable, that the state requires in and of itself that we be considered second-class citizens or not citizens at all for much of the history, for example, in the United States. And then design plays a role in this, and I always talk to my students about the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793, and how by design it was created to remove the seeds from the fibers of cotton so that you can increase production, but increase production through slave labor, where in 1790 there was about 700,000 slaves in the United States. Through the invention of the cotton gin, and again, the efficiencies gained from this invention, there became 3.2 million enslaved people by 1850. And so again, by Eli Whitney in his writings, this is by design, that he knew the intent of the invention, he knew the outcomes of the invention, and this is a way in which design, as it participates in the colonial settler state, has been harmful to Black communities. In terms of Indigenous people, they are original custodians of the land, and they've been fighting assimilationist policies actively for over 500 years. The way in which this makes itself manifest in design is that it seems every month there's some fashion design house that is in trouble from a PR perspective for stealing the sacred designs from Indigenous peoples. This one's an example of the British fashion label K2Z, who stole sacred designs from a Canadian Inuit shaman named Awa a couple of years ago. And again, the reason why these fashion houses, let's say, for example, keep getting in trouble is that they don't actually believe that Indigenous people exist. They don't believe that they are communities that are worthy of having communication and consultation in the use of their sacred objects, in the use of their sacred designs. And so to the extent that the assimilationist policies of the state sort of was attempting to remove culturally as well as physically Indigenous people, that sense of Indigenous people not being around anymore, not being alive anymore, justifies, for many design firms, an example, the entitlement to their culture, and particularly, again, the sacred designs, which becomes problematic because in the Indigenous system, that the misuse, right, and misappropriation of sacred designs means that you're actually negatively affecting the harmony of the universe. And then in terms of POC, so POC consists of, in Canada at least, those who are East Asian heritage, South Asian heritage, those who are of Latinx, Middle Eastern, sort of anyone who is non-European and non-white, or neither Black or Indigenous. And in many ways, they've escaped their homes to become new settlers to the lands here in Canada, United States. And they have various privileges in terms of their relationship to assimilationist policies based on their class, based on their education, based on how light or dark their skin is. But again, as this image shows from the Magic Washer soap powder, that they've experienced discriminatory practices by the colonial nation state. In this case, this is an advertisement that is glorifying the Chinese Exclusion Acts that took place in 1882 in the United States and 1885 in Canada. So this is just to say that there's a great need to decolonize design, which is tied to Indigenous land sovereignty. But in preparation for this kind of sovereignty, that we need to liberate design from what we call the modernist project. And what this means is that, and again, as espoused like by places like the Bauhaus, that through technology you can bring luxury to the masses. And again, this is a notion of progress, where everyone can afford to have a good life, not just the aristocracy. That because of the great wars that have existed between the many countries in Europe, this notion of universal mankind, where you drop your national and ethnic histories and identities in order to sort of come together in a unity. So again, in the context of Europe, this has been quite revolutionary thinking, quite progressive, in one would say. But in the context of the colonial settler states, this becomes a project of colonization 2.0, where, again, the technology and the efficiency of progress is based on the taking for free of indigenous lands and the use of unpaid labor or low paid labor by Black and POC bodies. So that's what actually makes it cheaper for everyone to afford. And then again, this notion of universal humankind becomes justification for the cultural genocide that happens for indigenous peoples and Black peoples, where again, as an African American, I'm so far away from the African languages that my ancestors may have spoken because they were prohibited to speak them when they came to the United States. But how do we begin to change that? How do we begin to change that notion of design? And what we've done is we decided to focus on the youth. This is a project called It's My Future Toronto, in which we've recruited 8 to 12-year-old Indigenous, Black, and POC youth in the Toronto area. And really, it's a part of a project that we're doing for the city of Toronto, where they're trying to bring new ideas around how the city can recover from COVID-19, as well as bring more justice to Indigenous and Black and POC communities. So we think that you have the best ideas. Again, there was a lot of people who've been involved with this. So many of our industry partners really got involved to sort of support the project. So Wolf Olins did our amazing branding. That the Globe and Mail, which is our major newspaper in Toronto, did the support for journalism. Many of our students in the OCAD University worked on the policy aspect of it. 2 major advertising agencies, Sidley and Juliet, worked on the advertising. And then we had famous directors like Alison Duke and Julian Lutz, PKA Director X, with the video. And then Microsoft, particularly their Minecraft divisions within Microsoft, participated greatly as well as focusing on working with community organizations to recruit the youth, because they have the long-term relationships with the community, and we're in some ways just providing a service for them so that they can better support their clients. So there was set up in 4 steps. The first step was report. So this is working on the Globe and Mail, how to learn about what stories are going on in your community and tell your own stories. The second was imagine. So imagining the problems and solutions and using drawing to show those ideas. Learn how to make a model or prototype of a solution so you could connect it to others for feedback. And then connect, and also as part of this, Minecraft was part of this making session. So we had a special workshop on making with Minecraft. And then connect. How do you connect it to the different areas? So how do you connect it to government policy? How do you connect it to journalism? How do you connect it to advertising? 3 of the most powerful institutions that affect the everyday lives of youth: the government, the media, and advertising. So we created 15 different short how-to videos, and I'll just show a little bit of them. So how to design.
We acknowledge the land on which we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Ashinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Tkaronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Welcome to Learn How to Design series of short videos to show you how to imagine, make, and connect your ideas to change the world around you. We should start with the question, what is design? Where nearly everything that is made by people in the world is design. A car, a house, a plate, a pair of shoes, the posters to promote a movie, a swing set, the clothes that you are wearing. Someone has had to imagine these things as ideas, make them into something, and then connect them to others, including you. The things that have been imagined have not always been good things. Colonial and racist designers of white European heritages have imagined things that have been harmful to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, including Asian, South Asian, Latinx, Middle Eastern, and other racialized people. We're going to meet 6 BIPOC designers who's going to talk to you about their design careers and maybe convince you a little bit as to why you might want to design for us and by us as well.
Hi, my name is Sage Paul. I'm Urban Discipline, and I'm a designer. You might know me from doing costume design on the film Falls Around Her. I got paid very well for that. I do this work for us and by us because it's just who I am. I'm an Indigenous woman.
My name is Mark Rutledge. My heritage is Ojibwe and Anishinaabe. My mother is from Little Grand Rapids First Nation, and my father is from Laxville First Nation. I'm a communications designer, which is a mixed discipline between design and information development, which is concerned with how print and digital media communicate with people. My work, you might know, is Indian Horse the Movie. I designed the website and the awareness campaign that went with it. I got paid very well for the work. I designed for us and by us Indigenous folks because our voices have been silenced for too long.
My name is Julian Christian Lutz, professionally known as Director X. My heritage is Swiss and Trinidadian. I'm a director, which means on set and before we get to set, I am the boss. I'm creatively in control. You may know my work from Hotline Bling, Drake, and I got paid a fair amount. Directors can make a good living when they're working. And I design for us, by us, Black folks, because I'm compelled to do it. All my life I've been drawing, I've been into visual arts, and it's what I'm made to do.
Hi. My name is Angela Baines. My heritage is Afro-Caribbean British. You can probably tell by my British accent. I'm a graphic designer, which means I communicate ideas the audience resonates with and takes action. My work that you might know is the Free Nelson Mandela campaign. For that project, I actually volunteered my time. However, as a graphic designer, I actually get paid very well for the projects that I work on, and I'm able to invest in my studio, invest in my staff, so it pays very well. I design for us and by us, Black folks, because it's important that we tell our story our way.
My name is Gary Texali. My heritage is Indian. I'm an artist and illustrator, which means I do work for galleries and commercial clients in equal proportion. My work, you might know, is my art on traffic boxes all over the city of Toronto. I got paid fairly and signed an artist-friendly agreement, which is always my rule. I design for us and by us South Asian folks because I believe in Dharma. That's the Sanskrit word for duty. My Dharma is to honor my soul by honoring my people.
My name is Randy Lee, and my heritage is Chinese Filipino-Canadian, which means that I'm ethnically Chinese, born in the Philippines, the second-generation Chinese diaspora, and immigrated to Canada when I was a child. I'm an industrial designer, which means I get paid designing products and services for and with different user groups. My work, you might know me, is when I designed products for Indigo Books years ago. I got paid per product that the bookstore bought, so it's pretty sweet as they had a lot of stores across the country. I design for us and by us because it's important to see everyday products not just made in Asia, but products also designed by Asian Canadians.
So we made tons of videos kind of explaining what is design. And again, try to recruit so many different youth. Our ideal is to have 100 youth. But through the process, only 4 youth ended up submitting videos. And I'll explain a little bit why of that. But I'm just going to show you Sumiya's video of what she submitted.
Hi, I'm Sumaya. I'm 10, and I'm working with It's My Future TO to design something that can change your day. So let's get to it. This app is called Reach Out Connect because we want you to connect with other kids who might be going through the same problems that you are going through. This app is for you to especially connect with other kids your age and who look like you. So let's say you're being put down by police brutality or racism. That's okay, because you can talk to other kids who are being put down by that too. This app is to also teach you how to open up and to teach you that there's other people around the world and in different places that is actually feeling what you feel. It will also help you conquer your fears or conquer other people's fears on how to know that you can always open up. Even if you don't know them, you know that they'll be there for you. And of course, this is a safe environment. And we want you to know that we're always here for you. Lots of kids have been feeling.
So that just gives you a sense of kind of what the kids submit. So what were the problems, right? That we only had 4 youth participate in the direct sort of way. First of all, it's a progress problem. We were relying a lot on technology that required the support of the caregivers to be able to complete the work, right? And so this is just an image from the Minecraft workshop that we put together with Minecraft. And then precarity, because the BIPOC caregivers were really busy first dealing with COVID-19, but also sort of just living their everyday lives, that they really didn't have the bandwidth to be able to support their youth in participating in the way in which we expected. And so our big kind of understanding was that, again, working with youth, it means you're actually working with caretakers. So you have to actually make it so that the youth can work independently, or you have to be very supportive of the caretakers. So where we're at now, we're in the process of redesigning the experience. And to do so to reduce the burden on caretakers in the process. So we're redesigning the website to make it easier for the kids to use. We're setting up synchronous online workshops in January and March so that the caretakers can sit their youth down and have a break and allow us to walk them through the processes of making. And then we've sent out packages of swag just to show all of the youth that we invited that we really appreciate them, and again, see them as part of the It's My Future Toronto family. And so, again, why this is important for us is that the youth, we want the youth to really understand design, but understand the way in which design can be respectful to their heritages, respectful to the challenges they face, and respectful to the ideals, because the reason why we chose 8 to 12-year-old youth is that many times people don't listen to the ideals of this particular group of people. And so we're going to do more. We can continue the project into January and March. And as you can see from Sumia's ideals, that we're really excited about the ideals that the students are going, the young people are going to bring about how to address COVID-19. And again, how to address even the underlying issues of systemic racism and discrimination. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. I look forward to many of the questions that you might have about the project or where we're going next or how you can participate as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very inspiring and also provocative presentation, particularly this piece around a critical engagement with design. It's quite often it's easy to be a little bit glib about design and say design as a force for change, design shapes and improves lives, and actually to take that step back and absolutely very clear that there's a sort of whole heritage around design and notions of progress that needs to be problematized and also then come into this space of opportunity and empowerment through design, and working with the 8 to 12-year-old age group absolutely is the sort of the sweet spot, when our understanding is that young people, this is when they start to think about their future pathways, identities. It's absolutely the time to really open up to role models, broaden horizons for young people. It's a really, really interesting project. Thank you. I'm going to start. We've got a whole lots of questions here, and we've got plenty of time. So my first question will be around, you talked a little bit about this, but your main takeaways, the main learnings from It's My Future Toronto project, and how you see this sort of iterative process playing out in the future of the project.
One of the big learnings was just how iterative it was as a process, because you know, in our heads, we imagine, you know, like you can imagine the amount of energy that was put up with the team to sort of prepare everything. And so we're like, here. And then to have, in some ways, the young people and their caretakers to be like, we're not ready. We're not ready for you. Was, you know, at first quite heartbreaking. And this is where I think being a designer helps, because it's like, okay, don't cry. Just figure out how you can make the experience easier. What were those sort of things? So we sent out some emails to talk to some of the caretakers, just to sort of, again, build on the relationship. And they were like, really, I just was too busy. I was trying to figure out, school had just started. We were trying to figure out whether it's going to be remote or not remote with COVID. And so we just didn't have the ability to really focus on this. And again, you know, we thought, we knew it was going to be difficult. So we set up, it's like, we're going to give a $75 incentive to each of the youth. We got all the software licenses that were needed for free. So we thought we accommodated for everything in terms of like, what would be a technological barrier? What would be a financial barrier? What we didn't account for was just how the lack of time that many caretakers have to be able to support their young people. And because they're 8 to 12-year-olds, it's very difficult for us to embrace them directly in the same sort of way. Like we have to for, you know, like we were under the guidance of the COPA in the United States because of their partnership with Microsoft. And so we had to do the Child Online Privacy Protection Act to set up our website so that everything had to go through the caretakers and their approval for the youth to be able to submit, for the youth to be able to share in many ways, because this is private information that they're sharing. So I guess our big learning was that we were thinking about the caretaker, but we hadn't realized the extent to which, in some ways, that the caretaker's bandwidth in and of itself could be a barrier to the success of the project.
Thank you. That's absolutely that context piece for understanding the needs and the opportunities around young people in the wider environment that they are, you know, their sort of lived experiences and how that impacts with the project. Loads of questions actually. There's one that's just, I think you'll be able to give a very succinct answer to, and then I'll follow up. So I'll ask you 2 questions here. They sit together quite nicely. So thank you very much, everyone, for sending your questions in. So there's one, actually a couple have come in on this, just around the accessibility of the project. Is it open in its next iteration? Is it open to all young people around the world, or does it have a focus at the moment on Toronto? So that's the first.
So we're still piloting in Toronto, just to kind of, and mostly because I think it goes back to sort of the land-based aspect of kind of thinking about decolonization. So we're going to pilot it here in Toronto. We're going to tie it deeply to, again, where are the places that the youth can have impact. But the ideal is that once we kind of figure out the model of how this works, then it's like, franchise it, right? So work with other partners in different places to say, here's the model. It's actually all here on the website to be set up. We are happy for you to sort of take and adapt this model. We're happy to support it. We're happy to, again, like we have all these industry connections, so we're happy to sort of connect you with those who are part of this It's My Future Toronto kind of community as well. So our intent is to sort of pilot it here in Toronto, but there's great ambitions, especially from the Microsoft Minecraft team. Like the Microsoft team is really excited about sort of being able to take it nationally as well as sort of internationally. So
we'll look, let's sort of watch this space. But also, you say there are so many fantastic ideas already in this project that can be borrowed and developed. I think particularly this really interesting working across policy, editorial, advertising, helping young people understand this is around kind of power structures and how they can engage with those and influence. I'm really excited about all the questions that are coming in, by the way. I'm going to read you a comment and then move to some questions. So this is actually come from anonymous. Not so much a question, but just so enthusiastic about this project, because even if the young people don't consider design as a future career, they can engage with design as a vehicle, platform, mindset to develop their confidence and ability to share their voice. And we know from broader pieces of research, the World Economic Forum talks of cites creativity as a key skill for young people, and that opportunity through building creative confidence for young people to feel empowered and find their voice and know where the sort of avenues to then share that voice and how to engage with the sort of the power structures and how to change those. So very inspiring. Okay, on to the next set of questions. So how can academics who are teaching the next generation of trainee teachers build in this approach when the trainee teachers are, could be seen to be constrained when they go into class by both kind of curricula and by classroom practices, or what might be understood as these sort of traditional approaches to design?
Well, I think one of the things that was really important. So this work comes out of work that we've been doing in the Black Youth Design Initiative at OCAD, and it's a thing where it's one of 5 different steps to kind of address building up sort of design confidence and capabilities. One of the big decisions that we make was that we weren't going to follow the typical design process, but what we're going to talk about is design as imagine, make, and connect, right? So because those are things that these are things that youth do all the time. They imagine all the time, they make all the time, and they connect. And when we were having the conversations with the partners, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that it was like, we are going to meet the youth where they already are. But what we're going to do is provide them with vocabulary to say, yes, this making that you're doing, this is part of design. This imagining you're making is actually part of the big ideal that you do in advertising. So it's a thing where what you can do in the classroom is that all your classroom activities are really surrounded around imagining, making, and connecting, right? So even if you're reading is meant to, again, facilitate the imagining process, right? But then, again, you can ask them to make something, and the connecting, right, is then just sharing it with others so that the impact of what can be done can be spread. So we take design in a very, I guess, organic sense. And that is just part of being a human being. Well, actually not even human beings, because many other creatures we know imagine, make, and connect as well. So I guess my thing is our framework around design is meant to be sort of integrated into sort of every different aspect. So when we talked about policy, you imagine policy, it gives this particular forms in which you make it, and then you connect it, you share it with other people. With advertising, it's easier, closer, because it's a design, but again, the same thing with news reporting is that you imagine what the story is you find out and make and ground that into sort of real understandings by people in your neighborhood, right? And that's what you're making, and you're making through visual images, you're making through photography, you're making through words, and then again, you connect it to other people. So there's all aspects, I think, of this process can be of imagine, make, and connect can be built into everyday learning that happens in the classroom. And then, again, the confidence building part is really key to this project, because again, part of the reason why we chose the 8 to 12-year-olds is that that's you can see the difference even when we've done this kind of work with 13-year-olds, that something happens that they begin to lose their confidence in their ability to imagine, make, and connect. And so we're trying to reinforce that. And if it could be reinforced in the schools, that just makes it even better, right?
Absolutely. And it's very interesting to think about that the 12 to 13, really supporting young people at such a kind of critical time, and the role of teachers in being these really powerful kind of influences actually in that process. You spoke about design, the question, making values tangible. What are some powerful ways that you've seen this with students?
Well, like I said, right now we're under this process of decolonization is really one of our strong values that we're trying to, again, make manifest into everything that we do. And what's really interesting is that, like, because of the changes in the education system in Canada in particular, like the 8 to 12-year-olds are on it much more than my faculty members are in the university. And so what's been really interesting is, again, the way in which like the young people are engaging with Indigenous languages, the way in which they are, again, sort of even the land acknowledgement, knowing who are the traditional owners of the land, the way in which, I mean, in all of the videos, even of the 4 that the youth submitted, there was a really strong language around justice. Like, especially the 2 of them used Minecraft actually as a way to both demonstrate, critique, and offer solutions to differences in class structures, right? That they were experienced in terms of like what's a good neighborhood and not so good neighborhood, and what material objects would exist, and whether they would have a bed or not have a bed to be able to sleep in. So it was really fascinating to see how this value of decolonization, right, was made manifest already in the youth's understanding of like whose land it's on. So they're in their understanding of who has things and not have things, and what are the ways in which you can make society more equal and more just. And that was a really, really strong thread in the work that all of the youth produced. And that just came from, again, their own lived experiences, but it's deeply grounded in that sense of like decolonization, which we made manifest even in the videos that we showed them around how to understand design, how to understand, you know, like the Globe and Mail did like 5 versions of their introductory video because we kept pushing them to say, no, you need to say more about how media has been harmful to BIPOC communities, because they won't believe you. Like, let's go into advertising. I mean, let's go into journalism. I mean, it's great, unless you address that first, because that directly affects them, right? So in that sense, we've made these values quite tangible, right, through the work that we're doing. But again, they live already quite tangibly in the worlds of the youth that we're engaging with. We're just helping to connect them, right? We're just helping to connect and amplify their understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I suppose that's one of the kind of benefits of working with design. It's a real world discipline, and therefore this is not an area to be disingenuous about the context in which this discipline sits, and the experiences of all those who produce, consume, our lives are shaped by this. And on that notion of design as a discipline, another question around whether you believe that design should be taught discretely as a discipline or class in itself, or more broadly embedded as a method for learning and understanding across the curriculum, across other areas.
I'm an and both kind of person. And I do so because, like, again, for us, design is about imagine, make, and connect, right? And so in that, like I said, is embedded in everything in which we do. But again, I guess understanding that there's a profession called design is really important in terms of helping people be able to imagine possibilities of themselves. So again, like, we were very specific in the videos that we did, like with the BIPOC designers, to talk about the fact that, like, I got paid very well for this work, right? Because one of the barriers to increasing the number of sort of diverse peoples in design is that, again, when some parents or caretakers, when they see that their kids are loving to draw at 8, 12-year-olds, they begin to discourage them a little bit because they're afraid that they're going to become starving artists. So to be able to talk about, like, to have Director X, right, talking about, like, I drew all the time, right, and I'm now a director and I'm a boss and I do these sort of things, but it's still, and I get paid really well to do that, like is really important message to show about design as a profession, that this is something you don't have to stop drawing when you're 8 to 12-year-old, because that drawing can lead you to a pathway of becoming someone like Director X, right? And so it's and both, because we need to understand, again, the way in which design as a human activity influences everything we do in Imagine, Make, and Connect. But we also need to point out to the possibilities of design as a profession in which they can engage and creatively, but also make a good living.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting in those the short videos by that really quite phenomenally inspiring range of designers, that they were all absolutely making the point that they're paid, aren't sort of well paid. But obviously that's not always the case, and you know, young people are, that's definitely, you know, they're really they're also, you know, that is they are interested in that aspect of the profession. Just moving a little bit more to your own kind of personal or professional experience in this field. There's one question around your own professional trajectory, so how you moved from design into anthropology and what some of the rationale for that was. And then also one around whether you ever sort of struggle to find answers in the context that you're working within as a professional. And this is from Leo, who says, you know, sometimes there's a sense of being a bit lost when dealing with potential prospective sort of futures, because this idea of a traditional design is limited and lacks perspectives actually beyond sort of white narratives. So again, it comes back to this piece around role modelling, you know, visibility, whose stories are being represented, who's telling those stories. So how has that sort of informed you in your own professional trajectory?
So I mean, I always say I'm the queen of the land of misfit toys. I mean, my pathway into design, again, like all of my degrees are in anthropology, right? But it's one of those things that, you know, the projects that I did in my journey were very designerly. So, so for example, in my junior year project, I did a puppet show where I made all the puppets, made all the costumes, wrote the script, learned how to make, you know, do fire tricks and everything to tell the story of Prometheus using my anthropological knowledge in terms of now I can't remember to say the Homo erectus. And then my PhD dissertation, every chapter had a different vernacular design. I did my fieldwork in Ethiopia, so wherever was the vernacular way of expression in the different regions of Ethiopia, my PhD dissertation chapter on that region used those similar design elements to do that. So I was always, let's say, I'm a misfit anthropologist because I always brought a great sense of visuality into the work that I did. So for a weekly paper, you might get an essay, or you might get a comic strip, or you might get an abstract drawing in which I have to provide annotations as to what's going on. So I was very lucky that very few people try to put limits on my imagination of how I express myself as an anthropologist. And then meeting professional designers was for me like meeting, these are my people. Like I finally knew like I belong somewhere. But even in that journey, it was really difficult because early in my career around 2006, I was going both to anthropology meetings and conferences and design meetings and conferences and feeling like the odd person out in all of them. So what I did was with other people, we just started creating our own community around design anthropologists, these hybrid folks. And so I've built, you know, programs in design anthropology in Australia. Again, being here in Toronto, there's already been a strong sort of design anthropological focus at OCAD. It's just now connecting that to Indigenous ideals of like what it means to be human. So in many senses, I would define my career as actually creating the conditions to build the communities of like-hearted people. And a lot of, even the It's My Future Toronto project was really just gathering a group of different people who shared the same concern and the same interest in getting BIPOC youth imagining possibilities for themselves. And then, like I said, creating the project, the structure, finding the funding, producing, I guess, the experience so that we can all work together and build community in that way. So all of my work has really been focused a lot on, again, being the queen of misfit toys on the island of misfit toys. But we all find, I guess, ourselves in our misfitness with each other.
That's such a, well, I mean, what a again, a sort of a provocative take on, actually the notion of the misfit actually being the catalyst. How your rubric of imagine, make, and connect, it also sort of applies to your own, career.
Yeah.
It really comes from within. I must just say the quality of the questions. This is just, thank you everybody, because you're so sort of engaged. So we've got time for a few more questions. I'm going to read one up now. Thank you for this brilliant presentation, Dr. Tunstall. I'm a Black woman designer, myself based in the UK. I must admit that I have now been following your work for some time and it really inspires me. I've worked on a design project to foster conversations around mental health and facilitate access to wellbeing resources for Black populations living in my neighbourhood. Working within an institution while addressing that topic is a bit triggering or quite challenging for me because I feel like I'm sometimes trapped into a narrative I'm trying to get away from. I'd really like to know, have you ever faced a similar experience in your career, and how to make sure you keep the needs of people you're working with who are going to benefit from the design at the centre of your work?
Well, I mean, even in this project, we took a great focus on health and well-being. So in the video around imagining your problems and solutions, there's actually so Julian Lutz does a meditation session in there. So he does a guided meditation because we sort of, and again, he has a organization called Operation Prefrontal Cortex, which uses mindfulness and meditation to work through gun violence, right, in Toronto. And so when I invited him, I'm like, I want you for your director skill, but I also want you to lead meditation, because as we're asking the young people to imagine some of their problems, that might generate some feelings that they may not know what to do with, right? And so let's then bring them through this process of meditation to calm them down. And then we can channel that into generating ideas around the solutions to the problems that they're dealing with, right? So I guess to say we take a very mindful approach to things. And part of it is that in order to do community care, you have to do self-care. But also you have to provide the opportunity for community to do self-care for themselves. So, and again, dealing with, with this project and also with the project that precedes this, the youth are dealing with some very heavy issues. We've had, again, youth talk about gun violence, and how do you address gun violence when you're an 8-year-old kid? And what we brought them to in that discussion was that, well, what is it that they were really, was there something that they really wanted to say and didn't know how to be able to say? And what in that scenario ended up being the case is that they talked about being fearful when more than 5 people come to the house. So again, we said, okay, well then you have something to say. Communication design is about saying, so we can make want to make a poster or something. So they made a sign that says no more than 5 people. And the idea was you put it at the sort of in the doorway, right? And that then the idea is that then that becomes the trigger for this 8-year-old to talk about why he's afraid of there being more than 5 people. Because if people are going to come in and say, well, why no more than 5 people, right? So it gave him the opportunity to express what he's feeling about the context in which he's living. Again, all of our training that we do wellness training, we do trauma-informed training, we do anti-oppression, anti-racism training, because in preparing our facilitators for this, they need to be able to handle their own feelings, but also be able to handle the feelings of the people that they're engaged with. And so, so it's really important is to build in those support systems. It's really important. Like, again, I'm a bit advocate for mindfulness and meditation. I have a therapist, which is really important in terms of being able to address, again, some of the toxicity that exists in the world, and the way in which sometimes as designers, we absorb a lot of that, right? And so if it is possible to set those structures of support in place, it's really, really important to just be able to continue to do the work, to be able to continue to do the community work. Because again, as they say, it's like if you're empty, then you have nothing more to give. So you have to fill yourself up first. You have to be whole within yourself, and then you can both model and support wholeness in others.
Well, I mean, no better way to finish the talk, Dori, and that straight to the heart. And you talked about, you know, a like-hearted community of practitioners, and it really is. It's very refreshing and sort of heartening to hear you speak really to the core of what it is to be human, you know, and to acknowledge all of the challenges, particularly now, but you know, these are ongoing actually, that everyone is facing around the world, but in particular as young people, and using design in a very authentic way to address those. And I just love this idea of this Operation Prefrontal Cortex. Just wonderful. So thank you so much. I know we're nearly out of time, but just a little bit of wrap up to do, but that was just really inspiring and thought-provoking, and such a joy and a privilege actually to hear from you today. And thank you again everyone for the excellent questions right to the heart of the matter.